Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. I just did this little scene, I guess we can call it a scene, but it's supposed to be more kind of a, indicative or representing something like a journal page or something like that, or a sketchbook page. I just kind of isolated my imagery, but tried to incorporate it into a composition, a minimal composition, but a composition nonetheless. But it's where you would have just your kind of isolated imagery used. I could just stamp it out, but I thought it would be better if you just kind of fill it in. It'd be something that, you might see in like a watercolor sketchbook or something like that. I mean, these aren't they're dye-based watercolor inks, but, it's not real super sketchy or painterly or anything like that, but, I'm kind of going for that type of feel here, just with the isolated imagery, and as I mentioned in the lesson here, the video, is if you choose to watch it, I stamped this one out first, and I thought, I was just kind of addressing it just in terms of one image, kind of like on a little, I don't know, island, just sitting by itself, and I thought, well, maybe we should, this would look good with another, row of trees back here, or cluster of trees, I should say. So I added that in. I don't know, I set it, and then I wasn't going to do it, but it was kind of bothering me, so added that in there, addressed it the same way, kind of anchored it down with a little bit of color, and then added that swatch of blue in the background, and then this little, trio of images, that Gulls stamp is separate from these other two. It created its own little kind of circular composition where visually, you take a look at the first scene, or first image, and it kind of would, pull the eye to the background, and I think those little birds up there kind of transition you back into this scene, so it creates this type of little visual path for the viewer. But anyways, I had fun with this. It's always one of those things where when you kind of change, something that you've been doing in terms of media or formats, I'm always kind of addressing the edge of the page. I'm filling up, some scene, and oftentimes it's almost in a vignette where it's really kind of closed off like this, where this is opposite. It's, we have imagery in the middle, and that opens up on each side of it, and it opens up to the edge of the composition. And again, in the spirit of something like what might be a sketchbook or something like that, or I don't know, a little journal or something like that. I was thinking I could have done this on this would look good on let me get a clean piece of paper. This is a half-page scene, but I'm not saying I would add this in here, but if a full-page scene looks something like that, I thought, that would be kind of neat, then people could kind of journal up here. You can write a letter to something. Can you imagine having that imagery down here and just kind of writing a handmade, note to someone? I don't know, you sign it down here or something like that. But it could have the flavor a bit of like a sketchbook or something like that, or a journal or something like that. You can have other things up here if you want to. You can have like a little sun or a moon or something of that sort. This could be, a nighttime type of scene if I did it in blues and dark blues or something like that. It could be snow all the way around. You could do a little moon up here or something of that sort. So anyway, having these open areas like this would be perfect for quotes or whatnot, On a half page, you can certainly write, things right, below this and around it in the sky if you want to. But anyways, this kind of little addressing of the imagery as kind of scenes in themselves is kind of a fun way to go. And if I've done it before, I don't remember, so I don't know. It's going to be one of those things that I'm going to have to play around with a little bit more. Same media. As far as the ink application, it's kind of addressing things in the same way, going with light, mediums, and darker tones, except instead of working from the edge, applying that inward like that, I'm kind of applying it from the inside out. For me, that, just I had to get kind of the feel of it, you know, and stroking it from this way, you know, and getting those little touches of green, going like that, starting in here, doing these little strokes outward like that. And the same thing with that little bit of sky, kind of streaking some colors like that, and then doing it from the opposite end like that. So, I don't know, for me, it's always kind of fun to play around with new media, but it's also fun to play around with what you've been working with, but just in a different way. And, I don't know, those things can yield, I don't know, a variation of successes or failures, whatever, but it's certainly never a bad idea to kind of play around with things and see what you can come up with. So for me, this is new. It's nothing new for a lot of people, especially for like watercolorists or people go out in the field and do field sketches and whatnot. You know, it's kind of fun to go out and draw something and you write your notations underneath it, you know, as far as, you know, what you're doing. So anyways, if you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks, as always, for checking out the vids. Okay, we're going to do something a little bit different here in this piece. I say piece as opposed to scene. And I'm going to try to do something where kind of the stamped image in the scene is... it kind of represents itself. It's what it is. It's a stamped image. And I'm saying that because in most of the scenes, if not all of them that I've done, I've kind of utilized the entire surface of my whatever cardstock I happen to be working on or stamp board or whatever. I fill up the entire surface with color, with scenery, and it kind of represents this world into itself, okay? But this, by doing kind of an isolated stamping and not really bringing in all of the surrounding imagery around it, I would make this certainly the focal point, but it would represent just what it is. It's a piece of artwork or whatnot, and what that does is it really opens up kind of the surrounding areas, you know, for things like quotes, maybe a poem or something like that. You can put someone's name, of course, or whatever. So what I'm thinking about doing is using this, and I'm thinking about it using it more in terms of like a, I don't know what would be the term. It's a dry pad. This is a black ink pad right here. Something that you might see like in a more of like a sketchbook or something like that. It's more kind of painterly and I don't know, maybe poetic or something like that. Now I don't do this much at all. Like I said, I'm mostly doing scenes, but I would think that I'm, you know, going to be using primarily the same type of techniques that I use on other scenes, except this one just, I won't be filling in quite as much, but the transition from this image away from itself might, you know, take on, you know, a little bit of a different kind of experience, because I do want this to be not just kind of an isolated image. I want it to transition out away from itself, kind of in a graceful manner. Okay, now I added black over the whole thing, just with my stamp pad. And what I'm doing is I'm just going into the scene, or the image, and I am adding some color. I added some brown into it, and I'm adding some dark green. I don't think it's going to look like that brown or like that green here, but I'm hoping to get a little bit of variation out of it, okay? I don't want lime-colored limbs, but I might want just a little bit of a lighter touch for that variation using some of this green here, the lighter green. And I'm kind of doing it around on the top, like maybe like light is hitting it. What that looks like in the end result, I don't know, but we'll take a look here. Okay, now I'm working on half page. Oops. I'm working on a half page cardstock, okay? And what that gives me is it gives me, you know, this side area, you know, where I can kind of transition out from this image using, I think I'm probably primarily going to be using colors. I'll see about textures, and I'm not really quite sure about additional stamps because, again, I don't want this to be a full scene, but you know, kind of just what I was talking about, just a kind of a floating image, I guess you can say, but I do want it grounded, so what I'm thinking about it are shadows and whatnot. Okay, this is a large scene, so always give, you know, plenty of pressure right in the center area right here, because if you do it on the perimeter, all the pressure is going to be around on the perimeter. Stamps like this have a lot of surface area, so if there's any irregularities, you know, with your surface that you're stamping on, or, you know, if there's a dust or something like that, you know, you really have to give it some good pressure, especially in the more solid areas, okay? It's not really the size of the stamp, but the surface area that we're talking about here. And a stamp that has a lot of tonal changes in it and solids, you have to use more pressure. Like this is the same size, right? But there's a lot less surface area here, so you don't have to use quite as much pressure, especially in the center area. Alright, so let's see what we have here. Alright, so in here, I don't see too much of that brown, but there is a little bit of variation in here. You can see that where this is mostly black, you can see that little bit of a difference in hue in those trees. And you can certainly see where the green tones are within the trees. And I wanted some color in there, just inherent in the impression itself. When there's a lot of surface area, these Marvies, which I just did a video on in my last video. Alright, okay, there we go. This is the 1500 series, and these brush markers are really nice. They have that big, fat tip on there, so really good for coloring any type of imagery, but especially when you get up into the imagery that has a lot of surface area, solids, whatnot. These ones are really good for that because it's not going to chew up your pen. You don't want to scrub on there like that or something, you know, going with a 90-degree angle that's going to fray the tip and kind of smash it down. So I just kind of use it on its side, kind of at an angle of the tip, okay? So I'm kind of using it like that. Not on my hand, but just to show you an example. So if you go like this, you know, you're going to be smashing down tips of pens. But anyways, Marvi pen's pretty good. Really filled up with a lot of ink, so they last a long time. I mean, you can see these ones are the old incarnation of it. And these ones, I mean, these ones are not new. You know, they've been around for a long time in this barrel with the new, you know, kind of more graphic color coding. So these ones are probably, I don't know, 25 years old, you know, maybe. I don't know, something like that. Okay, now we have this laid down here. I'm kind of wondering if there's a little bit of a drying that still needs to take place. I see a little drop of ink on that rooftop there where there's a lot of surface area, but I can probably get in here and start coloring a little bit. You can color in with, you know, some dye-based inks, or, I don't know, in this scene like this, now, I'm thinking about maybe a little bit of swatch of some tone back there would be nice. Maybe in the form of some kind of light blue. But let's look at down here, okay? This does look like, you know, kind of just an isolated impression. But I was thinking about maybe we can kind of transition this out a little bit. Kind of like in the spirit of like a watercolor or whatnot. I think that would be kind of nice. Let's see what inks we have here. Okay, how about a peeled paint? Tim Holtz Distress Ink would be nice, I think. If we're thinking about like a spring meadow or something like that, we can bring in some other tones. Let's start off with something fairly light and go from there. Okay, let's take a look here. And I mean, I'm planning on using pens in here as well, but you can just go in here, and I'm kind of trying to determine if, you know, this surface is a little bit in need of drying a little bit and setting up, but it seems okay. If you haven't seen me use these tools before, it's just a sponge tip on here. This is called the Stylus Tool by Colorbox. And I'm using the white oval tip. Okay. I'm just applying this in a very light, with a very light touch. I'm kind of using somewhat of a dry brush technique here because I want to get a nice light tone down. I don't want it too streaky, okay? Which is easy to get, you know, when doing this type of application. So just kind of go with a light touch. You want to use kind of a light saturation of ink on your tip, but you also want to use a light touch in your application, okay? Now I'm going to add a little bit of background to this, and when I say background, I'm just kind of raising the horizon line a little bit. Okay, now I am dragging and streaking some of the imagery because it wasn't quite dry, but that'll be fine with me. Okay, so you can make the horizon line as high as you want it to be. You can put it, you know, back up here. I don't know if I would go up here. I don't think that would look quite as nice. So that's kind of setting it into the scene somewhat. Okay, I'm kind of dragging out like this from that center area. I got a little smudge there from something. But not a big deal. Not to me, at least. Okay. Actually, I don't want to get more smudgy. Something's smudging here. I touched something with my hand, and that was probably wet up there. Okay. But anyway. It's a little bit green there. Now let's see something else. That looks really strange, just with that green there. Let's try to brighten it up a little bit. This is a number 52 yellow-green Marvy. Just if you have something around, if you have something kind of light green or yellow, you know, use that one. Okay, so this is going to brighten up that Distress Ink peeled paint a little bit. Kind of looking around for opportunities here. Now this is a pretty light color, so not so much with this one, but I do start with this one. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for an opportunity to brighten it up. Yeah, in some ways it's kind of darkening it just because I'm getting a thicker saturation of ink with it, but keep adding on. This is another pale green. Even though I don't want it real super saturated, I do want this scene to be kind of anchored down as well as the objects. So for these objects, kind of encounter the white piece of paper or the surrounding area around them. I want there to be somewhat of a relationship between those, you know, those objects, the tree and the chapel, with the surrounding area. So what I'm getting at this is what I'm thinking. I want some shadows. You know, I want those trees to be casting a shadow. Okay? So even though it doesn't, you know, this idea of this scene or image being within, you know, this overall and not going to the edge, I still want it anchored kind of within that space. So I'm just kind of hitting it with a little bit more color, and where there might be some objects that would cast a shadow, that's where I'm putting it. Okay. Now this is a number 72 green. You can use the number 4 green. If I didn't, you know, I can use this pen. This green's kind of like a Christmas green or something like that. It's fairly neutral green. If you add a little bit of yellow to it, it'll become warm. Blue would become cool. So I wouldn't say this green is, well, I don't know, the pine green is a little bit warmer, but that number 4 green's kind of neutral in terms of temperature. But the manner in which I'm working, though, that being said, is I'm just kind of using what colors I have, okay? You don't have to use the exact same colors. I usually speak in terms of kind of the general color of something rather than the specifics of a certain line or brand. Because there's a lot of different choices out there. And the chances are, you know, like something like that, you probably already have some kind of neutral green or just a darker green in your supplies already, so. Okay, it's getting pretty dark. I don't think I'll go too much darker than that. I think this would kind of be interesting with a little bit of swatch above it, like with some blue maybe. I'll address this area around here. It kind of looks a little bit weird right now, but textures or something like that would work nicely with it, I believe. Okay, now let's try some let's try a couple kind of earthy tones with the distress inks. Let's try tea dye and antique linen. I need a new tip here. Let's see. Or at least a clean tip. Alright. This is the tea dye. Let's see what it's going to look like. It's a very light value, and my pad is probably a little bit dry, which is fine. When you're working with some dry pad, there's nothing like a brand new pad. I love them, but there is something to be said for kind of pads that are a little bit drier, because when you're applying less ink at any given time, it means that you can potentially have a lot more control over it, because it isn't applying it so quickly. This isn't like calligraphy or something like that where you're, your letter forms, you're making a fairly bold statement with it. Okay, maybe the side of this chapel. Inherent in the design. I'm going to put some of this down in this grass as well. It's inherently darker in the image itself. Well, here it is right here. Okay? It's in a little bit more shadow, see? So what I'm doing is I'm reiterating that with some ink, okay? So if you ever want to know where to add your shadows or where to make things a little bit darker, you can just kind of follow the image. Kind of as a good starting spot. Okay. And we're working some of this tone into this grass, kind of incorporates things in a little bit more. It doesn't look so kind of anemic. When you have color, or all of the objects are kind of approached in a similar fashion in terms of the richness, okay? It doesn't mean you have to get as dark everywhere within a scene, but I would have kind of a similar treatment of all of the objects. Okay, now this is a pale orange. It's not really so much orangish, though. It's more of like a beige, I guess. Kind of a warm beige. Okay. Add some of it down in the surrounding area. How about brown? Let's try that. Or, let me see if I have a walnut stain. Let's stick with the distress here. Let's try to go for a walnut stain. Okay. Let's go a little bit darker on the edge. Anchor the scene down, anchor the object. A little bit more shadows underneath the trees with this little bit darker ink. Okay, but see, it kind of gave a little bit of light to that chapel just by darkening in the right side of it. And, well, let's go ahead and use this anyway. I like what's kind of happening here. Kind of hit some of the shadows a little bit more. You know, the grassy area, it's fairly bright and rich in terms of the saturation of inks, so let's bring some of that spirit to the focal point, you know, which is the structure. Okay. Looks okay, I guess. Alright. Now, there's only so much you can do with, you know, a sponge tip like that. If you want to get more detailed, you have to use those tools that, you know, lend themselves to that application. Let's take a look at that chapel mainly. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay, I have some alcohol inks, okay? I want to... Here, this one's perfect. This one's called Biscuit, of all things. Let's go in and add some of this ink into it. It's going to be really, really light, but it's kind of good to start off light. I'm going to hit some areas in here that I think would be in shadow. Now, a lot of these areas that I'm adding this to are already darker than this color, so this color is not going to show up at all. But I like starting off lighter than I really need to, especially when I'm changing media, you know, going from dye-based ink to alcohol ink, going from kind of sponge applicator to, you know, fairly detailed nib here in the pen. All right, so that kind of gets me kind of into the swing of things using that this new tool. Okay. Okay, this I can do, certain planks of wood in here too, so that it's not so monotonous in terms of, whole area being kind of treated the same. I'm kind of going in, I'm coloring one or another, or half of one. No. Maybe these steps down here could use a little bit of tone. Okay, a little bit of the surrounding area, just for a little bit of continuity between colors. Okay, now let's say light is hitting that grassy area and it's kind of reflecting back up. I find that chapel in there is a little bit isolated in terms of, those brown tones. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this light color green and I'm adding a little bit of green to it just so it gives it something in common, alright? Now it stands to reason that if light is hitting, something that's green, it might be somewhat reflective and, some of the objects around it might be capturing some of that green reflection. The chapel doesn't look green, alright, even by doing that, but it kind of gives these two areas a little bit of continuity. A little brown in the green, a little bit of green in the brown. But it could be very subtle again, okay? Okay, now let's see. Let's go with some type of treatment around it now. Just still trying to think if I want a little bit of texture out here. Something like the sedge filler or some rocks might be kind of nice out here. Maybe I'll do that, but let's add a little bit of a transition again. I do love using my pigment ink in my scenes. And we're talking about kind of a transition. I think that'll be the perfect media to use in here to kind of transition this off to the, I keep wanting to say perimeter, but kind of away from my impression, okay? So let's try something like that. And I could use a little bit more color in here, but let's start off with this, okay? Okay, because the scene didn't get so dark, I don't think I need to remove too much off of this. Swab, I don't need to remove too much off the swab because I'm tapping kind of white into white, the surrounding area. Okay, so start off there, and kind of as I do this, a little bit of ink is coming off of this swab. Okay. What I want this to look like, and I'm adding a little bit too much, now I'm dabbing with the kind of the dry side of this. Cotton swab, the side has the ink, the side is dry, so you can remove ink as well. Okay, let's add some of this in the background. Kind of like light is hitting it. Could be kind of backlit in a way. I got a little smudge around that steeple, so this is kind of a way to kind of lighten that up a little bit too. we can put this our stamp object into kind of a glowing light. Kind of by doing that, see, it's kind of being backlit in a way. And by doing that, you can kind of do the same down in this grassy area, this transition area. It's kind of like the image is in a little bit of a fog bank. I don't like this over here, a little smudgy. Alright, same thing on this side. A little bit too much ink, but I'll just remove some of it. Kind of looking okay, but I need some of it in the foreground as well, or in front of some of these other objects. Yeah, so it kind of makes sense. I don't want just kind of that fog in the all in the background. You kind of need it kind of within too. So let's bring some of that in. Like a little bit of fog is rolling in, or just kind of morning mist, in a kind of a spring meadow. Kind of oscillate it, don't put it everywhere. Have, some areas that are just kind of pure color, and some, you can put a little bit of this. And as I always say when I'm doing this, you can remove it when it's wet, you can remove it, if it's dry, if you've added too much somewhere, just buff it out with a, you can buff it out with your finger. You can do it with a paper towel or anything like that. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of coming around, huh? It's kind of, you have to kind of, if you add this in one area, it looks weird, alright? It's because it's the only texture of its type within the whole scene, so you have to kind of use it kind of all around, but you can see where I'm kind of leaving some areas. Now where you leave it is just, there's no right or wrong there. It's just that you have to kind of leave some, otherwise. And it's important to kind of look at, what you're doing from a distance, hold it up and see how it's looking. Sometimes when we start adding in little details like this, I guess it's not a small detail, but when you start doing like these types of techniques where you're kind of focused in on one little area, as far as the application goes, dabbing around a little area for a while, sometimes you lose track of the overall, so it's important to kind of, take a look at it and see what it looks like, from, a little bit of distance, or, like of a natural viewing distance of someone looking at a scene or a card that they've received. Okay, it's looking a little bit more painterly, which I like. It's kind of like a little watercolor, which I love, but I'm lousy at, you know, doing that type of thing. But alright, let's see here. It's really missing the thing that I often do in any type of scene, and that's small little details, you know, that can kind of bring something like this to life. Alright, so, alright, I'm not going to do you know, Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white in here. Let's just do something quickly, okay? Let me make sure my Uniball Signo pen is working, flowing nicely. And it seems to be. Let's go and add little details in here. Little sparkly details, and that's what I'm often missing. After I do scenes that, you know, where I've applied a lot of ink, you know, it looks rich in terms of colors, but it can kind of look a little bit muddy too, so I think that scenes can really benefit from some little flourish of some sort. It doesn't have to be this, but this typically works for me as far as my aesthetics go. I like little details within a scene, sparkly areas. Yeah, I mean, how I'm using it right now, I guess it kind of represents little kind of flowers in the grass. See how it's a little bit irregular? I kind of clustered it. Everyone, well, I don't know about everyone, a lot of people, including me, when you first start doing this, it's really easy to kind of apply this in too regular of an order, alright? It's like where all the dots are kind of evenly spaced out. It's always like 1/8 of an inch apart from each other. And then it just kind of looks like, you know, some sort of pattern. So I like to, I'm trying to purposely kind of cluster some little dots. And that's the way I see kind of wildflowers anyways. Alright, now that's that texture down here representing wildflowers. If I add a little bit to the tree, maybe. It's very subtle like this because I don't have any background colors, so it's not doing a whole lot in terms of a very noticeable texture or highlight, because, you know, it's kind of white against white in the background. But these little dots, though, will bring kind of a little sense of continuity between these background trees and those foreground colors. Which I think someone will kind of pick up, maybe subconsciously. I mean, those dots in the tree really are not quite as visible or attention-getting as they are in the grass, of course. But I do think that kind of that texture is something that's registered kind of in our minds in some way. Alright, so let's see. I'll add a little bit to this chapel. I don't want to add too much, but just will give it, sorry if I'm doing this out of the frame of the camera. Okay, let's add a little bit to this. These pillars can kind of stand out a little bit more. Bringing a little continuity to the this church and the surrounding area. Okay. Yeah, that might be a little bit too much. That would be a perfect opportunity for the Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, where I don't want just a big ball of white pigment, white gel ink. So just like the, you know, the Frost White color box pigment ink, you know, that little dot will just buff right off for you. Okay, so that's that. Let's have some fun now. As if the rest of this hasn't been fun. But let's add in some little colors. I can do orange for something like poppies, pink. Pink would kind of match nicely with that green, though I think that lime green. Let's try these Jelly Roll Moonlight markers by Sakura. Let's see which one of these looks the best. Is this one working? I thought there was some of these that were working and some of them that weren't. That one's real kind of fluorescent looking. Ooh, that one is really bright. I don't know, that looks awesome. I love that, how bright that is, but for this, I don't think I want that. Okay, now this is the Sharpie Paint Pen. I think I might want something a little bit more dull, okay? You hear that ball kind of thing kind of rattling around in there. I apologize if I've been doing too much off screen in this video. I haven't been paying attention too much. Anytime I kind of do something that I don't really do too often, I'm kind of concentrating a little bit more because of, you know, I just don't know what I'm doing, or you know, I know what I kind of want to do most of the time, but you know, I'm just kind of paying a little bit more attention to I don't know, kind of the application of it. Alright. This is pink. Yeah, it's pretty nice, I guess. And I'm kind of adding these little pink little flowers into the mix. Let's get you into the full view. I can add some of these pink flowers out into the white area too. Alright. It's going to come into life though, don't you think? It looks better as a kind of isolated, you know, little image. And again, this would be perfect for some kind of quote out here. Figure that out. Alright. Am I feeling gutsy enough? Something really bright in there. Yeah, why not? Okay. I've kind of transitioned up a little bit. Well, let's see if this one's even working. This is the Jelly Roll. Orange. It's real fluorescent-y. Day Glow. Now, let me see if I can get this flowing a little bit better. I haven't used some of these in a while, and some of them at all, so don't want to blame the pen too much for it not working, because you know, these pens are probably 15 years old, and if you haven't used them, you know, I don't know if I should really expect it to be in really great working condition, but, you know, the fact that these kind of, you know, work at all really says something about the product and tip, I guess. Okay, let's see if I can get a few marks out of this without kind of having to redo. And I don't think it's wrong to kind of, you know, incorporate a lot of different colors into a piece in terms of something like this type of mark. I see it all the time out in nature, a field of grass during springtime. You get kind of a variation of different colors and hue, where there's different types of flowers within a given space. So that's kind of fun. So it kind of brings it to life though, doesn't it? Those little pen dots. I mean, I think it looked okay before, but I think this just looks so much better. But I don't know. To me, I'm no watercolorist, and there are a lot of people that do this a lot better than I can, but I can certainly have fun on my first one. I haven't done this, I don't know, I've probably done this some other time. I don't know if I've done it in dye-based inks. But that looks kind of fun. You know, it'd be kind of cool is another, like, distant, you know, little thing of trees, and kind of approach it in the same way or something like that. And have, you know, it's a perfect space for, like, journaling too. If someone, you know, you want to write something down in, you know, this area right here, or you can do something down here or whatever. It'd be awesome if you're a calligrapher, which I'm not at all. But oh, I don't know. Let me figure something out in here. I was thinking, here's the overall. It's hard to see, but there's the overall scene, but I guess I don't need too much blotter paper underneath this one. But like some birds or something like that would be nice in here. A little animal standing off here in the distance. I don't want to, maybe the birds would be up here, because I don't want to kind of obscure this. But I was thinking about a little swatch of some blue tone up there, real loosely applied, kind of like this. You know, the approach with the grass down here, a little swatch of some blue ink, maybe fairly light, would be good. Just in terms of a little bit of a matching kind of application or texture up here in the sky to match the surface, the ground of this one. But let me figure that one out. I'll figure it out by the time this dries, I think. So let's see what we can find. Okay, I'm back, and I've allowed the imagery to kind of set up and dry. As I'm looking at this, I can tell that the pigment ink has kind of become a little bit more translucent, so I'll be applying another layer of this pigment ink throughout this little image. But I've decided to add another element into the scene just to kind of, I don't know, create kind of a more complete composition, but still keeping it within the spirit of this type of structuring, okay? Now, ideally, I would have done this right from the get-go because I feel that the trees and everything would match up better, but we'll see what we can do after the fact. Okay, so I'm going to try to approximate the coloring that I did on these trees on this one. This one's a little bit smaller in scale. I mean, this could be foreground trees, it just would represent something like younger trees, but in keeping with the spirit of this imagery that's already been stamped out, I'll say that these ones are smaller, but just, I mean, the same size, but just farther back in the composition. Okay, now what I mean by I would have, it'd been better if I stamped this out from the beginning for it to match. It's because, you kind of color things the same way, and, as I'm applying colors over here, I could have been applying colors in the background at the same time, and kind of the same, or a much closer treatment of the colors would have happened in that type of process. Okay, let's see. Dark brown, green, kind of a light green. Let's take and soften up some of the edges on this image. Okay, just a dry paper towel, dabbing it down pretty good around the edge. And I'll do the same over some of these branches, maybe around the perimeter on top. I can kind of put in some of that lighting that I want to kind of create kind of a softer light, like hitting these different images. And I don't know. What I'm doing is I'll give it, approximately the same type of space around the perimeter here as I did with this piece right here. What I'm doing is I'm thinking about some kind of triptych. Well, it's not really triptych, but a trio of images in here. Maybe it could be maybe it'll just be some birds up in the sky or something of that sort. But kind of an arrangement in threes would be good, just for kind of a compositional harmony, I guess. Okay, that looks okay to me. Now, but it looks really different, doesn't it? It just doesn't relate to this one at all, so we'll have to bring in some of those types of colors into this, as we did with this one. And let's see, I'm doing this. I'm trying to imagine some blue being kind of wisped back in there, so let's see if I have. Seeing if I had some blue on this applicator. Alright, let's see if I can do this. For me, it's the same type of stroke, but instead of, I'm always starting on the outside and working my way in like this, or usually, okay, like that. This time I'm starting from the inside and working out, so it's the same type of feel, but just kind of a, well, not kind of, it's a different spirit, This is a way to kind of go back in and introduce kind of this sky element, alright? But you're just doing it with a little bit of color, okay? And I think that's working out pretty good here. It's kind of setting the scene into the page a little bit more. And it's also what it's doing for me in terms of kind of compositional harmony. It's bringing that same spirit that's in this surface area, the ground, to just another area within the piece. I guess we can call it a scene at this point in time, being that this other tree is in here. I'm kind of blurring a little bit of that color that's on the tree. It's kind of dragging some of it out, so I have to be a little bit careful about that. Even though I did allow this to dry, it does seem to be dragging it a little bit. Oh, by the way, this is Memento Summer Sky. Kind of a nice thick ink. Really spreads nice and smoothly. So see, this is what I'm doing. I'm kind of working from this one little area and working out. And I flip it around and I work from that same area and drag it out this way. I guess it's kind of like reaching over into this other tree, just to incorporate it in slightly. Memento Summer Sky, I mean, it's a fairly light value of blue. Okay, looking in the screen here. It's kind of barely visible as far as what I did, isn't it? Let's add a little bit of this salvia blue. It's a little bit of a darker blue, but not by much. Okay, I won't add it everywhere, but yeah, I'm really starting to drag some of the trees in terms of a little bit of smearing. Try to be careful about it, though. Okay, something like that. You can even bring some of it down into your structure just to bring a little bit of that color, just for continuity. It doesn't make the chapel blue or anything like that, but what it does is it creates kind of a little bit of a, no, I keep saying that word over and over again, but it really is continuity between the different areas within a scene. Okay, now I'm going to be a little bit careful about this because I did just stamp this, so it is a little bit wet. But if it blends with some of that green, it won't be entirely bad. Just in terms of kind of bringing it together. Put a little bit up in the trees. Okay, so that kind of anchors it out a little bit. I don't like how this one ends. I think I need it kind of streaked out a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to be kind of careful because I don't want to, you know, if I keep doing this, I mean, it could reach, you know, the perimeter of the card, and that's not kind of in the spirit of what I want here. Kind of that little blue down here looks pretty good though, doesn't it? Okay. Alright, now, let's see if I can remember what colors I used at the base of this tree. I mean, this chapel and trees. pine green. I think I used the light green here. Did I use the Distress ink? I think I used some of the peeled paint, didn't I? I have a really bad memory, typically, so even though I just did this last night, but that's why I don't, I try not to do the same thing multiple times. In terms of a technique, I do, but you know, the types of scenes that I do, I don't know, a lot of it's just, you know, out of boredom. I want to do something new. There's just so many more compositions to do and techniques to try, and I don't know, combinations of media and whatnot. And I usually want to, I don't know, just keep exploring, so. But another reason could be just I have a really bad memory. It used to be better until I started Stampscapes, and I had to remember all kinds of things in terms of ordering and supplies and whatever. And I can't blame it on age, because it happened like right after I started doing Stampscapes. Okay, this that was peeled paint, Distress ink, really nice green. This is the yellow green, Marvy color. See, it wouldn't hurt to add a little bit more. Down here, it could use a little bit of brightening, or a little bit of a brighter tone. I always like the kind of those original Winnie the Pooh episodes where you're really aware that you know, this spirit of a book that's being read, because, you know, as you're watching it, the animation's happening, and you know, you see these flipping of the pages, you know, or something in the page comes alive and it, you know, moves into the action kind of off the page. Not exactly like this, but as I'm doing this, it kind of reminds me of those, I don't know, are they movies? I guess shorts, you know, animated shorts. But I used to watch those every year when they would come on. Alright, that's kind of anchoring down a little bit more. It doesn't really match yet. It needs more of that little bit of yellow. Maybe I can go a little bit brighter with the yellow-green here. Okay. Now if we want to add a little bit more shadow touches to it, we can go with a darker green. This one happens to be the pine green. It's number 72. Alright, now here's what I don't have. I used a lot of browns down in this surface area, because I was using a lot of browns, tan tones in that chapel. So let's go ahead and do that. Sorry, I keep reaching across the screen area here, grabbing my pens. This camera is like right in my face as I'm shooting this. This is the pale orange Marvy. Okay. A little bit of brown, number 6. Let's add a little bit of that down here too. Okay. Now, I think I want some of that blue. Okay. Now that I've inked up my tip here, I need to clean it off a little bit. I just squirt a little bit of water in here, and this is what I usually do here. I just take my tip and I squeeze it into a paper towel. If I'm doing it on my desk here. If I do, if I'm cleaning a bunch of tips, I take it over to the sink and I just run it in the, you know, in there. But here, that'll work. Boy, there was a lot of ink in there, wasn't there? Okay, this blue around here looks really nice. I'm going to add some more of that in the form of that summer sky. Memento ink. I can't tell you, that blue really is doing a lot, I think, around here. It just, I don't know, it's softer. And again, it kind of, you know, it reiterates what's kind of going up up in the sky area here. I don't know, for me this is a lot of fun. If you're like anyone that's a watercolorist, you know, or any of those types of people that do that would look at this and kind of laugh, but I don't know, I'm having fun at it. I think it looks, you know, for me it looks different than a lot of my other pieces, of course, and it's just a new way to use the imagery for myself. But any kind of watercolorist or whatever would look at this and, you know, this would look very, very, very basic here, but I don't know, it's a lot of fun. What do you, I don't know what this is called when you kind of work in that kind of style. It's like storybook or something like that. I mean, can you imagine a lot of like text running in here? That would look kind of interesting. I was thinking about doing a word stamp in here, but still kind of undecided. Okay, let's add some of these textures in here again. This is the Uniball Signo White. I'm not getting a good dot effect out of it. Let's see if I can get it flowing again. This one's kind of, it's kind of starting to run low a little bit. Yeah, let me get another one. Ah, much better. When I was looking at this piece this morning, it occurred to me that I need some variation in here. There's all these dots, but, you know, if you want to do a bigger dot, don't smash this down. Just kind of scribble a little, you know, a little bit more of a dot into it. I guess these dots represent flowers in this case. But yeah, just some variation would help. Alright, I'll try to work right side up. This is harder for me because I can't see it because my hand's like blocking my way, but I know it's better for the video here if I work kind of upright. Seeing that first day when I'm adding these down, I mean, I wasn't conservative with it, you know, in terms of the amount of color that I put down here, but I'm getting much more comfortable and, I don't know, gutsy doing these larger kind of little balls here, balls of ink. Now when I'm doing it up in the trees, it, you know, probably represents more of like a highlight. But having a similar texture in another area of the scene will bring that continuity to the forms and areas. Maybe it is some sort of, you know, pollen or something like that, a little blossom. But whatever it is, it's just, to me, the most important thing that it's creating is texture. In this case, you know, a similar texture that's happening in another area of the scene. Alright, now let's see what else I used in here. Let's go ahead and bring some of these other colors into it. I don't know if I'm going to add quite as much color in this background area, but we can just kind of start and add a few and go for that from there. I think it looks okay. Here's a purple one. Lavender. I love spring blooms, and especially if they're wildflowers. Just kind of hiking along in some area. Coming across all that color is such a treat. Alright, let's see what we have here now. Take that out, you can see kind of the overall. Kind of a fence or something out here would be kind of interesting, some sort of foreground. Again, those word stamps are like a little flock of birds up here. I mean, I could put some people in here somewhere. I do kind of want to work that kind of trio of imagery. Maybe some birds right in here would be kind of interesting. It seems like it's missing something up there, maybe down here. But I do want to leave some room. I am curious about some text. Or I can just put something in the background. We can leave it like it's like a blank card, you know, where you can put whatever you want in here. It could say, you know, happy birthday. You can journal in there. Some real handwriting, like cursive writing would be kind of interesting around in here. You know, because there is so much open space. Okay, but while I'm thinking of that, if my subconscious is working, I'll think about it while I'm doing something else, maybe. Let's use some of this pigment ink and go back to that type of treatment. Okay, too much ink. All right, too much. Just about the right amount. See, with each tab, it's very little, right? This is where everyone has troubles with it because they're using too much ink at any given time. If they're having troubles with this type of technique, you just really want to take a lot of it off and apply it in a nice, apply it in a nice, gradual manner. If it's representing what it's representing here, which is kind of mist or fog, you know, a little bit of illuminated thin moisture, you know, suspended moisture. A little bit of a battery change there. Okay. Re-inked, too much ink. A little bit better. Okay. Kind of softening the edges around here. Now I'm going to be applying a little bit more than what looks to be visibly enough, just because I know how kind of when it dried, it kind of became a little bit more translucent, or, well, not quite transparent, that it was just less opaque than what it looked like when it was wet. Or I don't know, not opaque, but the degrees of translucency were, you know, being affected by the drying process. So you can go a little bit more than what you think looks right if you're doing this. I mean, there is such thing as adding way too much, you know, but, you know, just get it where you want it, and I would recommend going a little bit further. Okay, so these two areas objects are starting to match up a little bit more. You know, the more kind of textures you put down, still could use a little bit of that warmer tone, I think, but looks okay. These trees could use, you know, could be addressed a little bit more too, with some additional color. I used some of the alcohol inks on this, I know, and I haven't really used it over here, but you know, some of that would be good to apply as well. Okay, I'm going to get more gutsy with the white gel pen. Because I like what's happening over here. It's more exciting down here. This looks, now it looks kind of, I don't know, a little bit lacking. Even though it's supposed to be there in the distance, I think we could use some more of this. There we go. Boy, that's a lot. Definitely a spring bounty, though, for sure. Alright, now I am going to think about another image to use in here to bring this into kind of a trio of imagery format. I'm still thinking about a bird up here, but I think that would be good, and then we can just kind of leave this blank. Or I don't know, I might look for a quote or something like that to put in here, but I think just a bird in there in the background would be nice. And then we would have our little kind of journaling type of sketchbook look. As far as the piece is concerned, so let me look around and see what I want to add into the scene. Something small, little figurine, kind of a focal point, I guess is what I'm looking for. Okay, I've been looking at some different imagery. I think this little doe would be kind of interesting. It would really create this type of compositional, you know, viewing direction, though, really just a slant, and I don't really like that. I like the idea of this kind of more circular type of composition running in here, visual composition. So I think creating these birds right here, maybe just the top part, it would create this kind of a circular viewing direction that would be perfect for this scene. Wouldn't make the scene a perfect scene, but I think that's just the using what we have. I think that would be the ideal type of compositional structuring to do, unless we added more things, you know. I mean, which I could, but just using what we have. Alright, I just inked this up with black. I'm taking off some of the ink off that bottom, or trying to take off all of it, off that bottom gull, just to keep them a little bit smaller. The larger one down here represents something a little bit closer to you, and I really want this kind of this arcing type of format here. I'll go like this. I can tilt it a little bit like that too, so that's what it would look like. All right. I don't know, it puts something, I guess you can say that that's something for the background. I guess you can say this is foreground, midground, background there too. So as far as like 3 layers of depth, that's what that would do. I'm still looking at this in here, wondering if there's something else that kind of would make this more complete from a compositional standpoint. Some kind of foreground in here, I think, would look reasonably good. I kind of want it within this space, though. You know, just some taller grass or something like that, maybe. Let me take a look at that and see how that would look. I don't know if I'll do it or not, but we shall. Okay, I've decided on this little winter twigs image. Let me show you what it looks like inked up to give you a better idea of what it looks like. Okay, just this little spindly little twiggy branch, you know. I just called it winter because it, well, it came out with a bunch of winter imagery, but it's just because it's leafless and kind of spindly. And I'm thinking about adding it down into this area for a little bit of variation. It's just all the same texture down there. Now what I've done is I've taken and ripped a paper towel, because this is going to represent the irregularities within kind of a grassy surface with the twigs coming out of it. I don't want the entire bottom of it just to be straight like that. I want there to be variation. And where I add this, I'm not really quite sure, but we'll just add some, and if we like it, we can always add more. Now, I don't want this to be too tall also, so where I mask it off, I'm probably only going to be using, I don't know, 50% of it maybe, something like that, just so it looks like a smaller couple twigs. Okay, see that right there? Let's zoom in here a little bit. Now I'm going to incorporate that in a little bit more too, with the use of some pigment ink. So in fact, I think I'll wipe off some of the bottom portion of this. I do this quite often with grassy areas. The grassy areas, I believe they're rich with color. I could use a little bit more of that one. They're rich with color and texture, but they can use a little bit more texture, typically, in my opinion. Okay, I'm just going with a few second and third impressions with this, just to give it a little bit of extra. Alright, now looking at that, I'm kind of in danger of potentially of creating too much of like a spooky foreground, using too much of that dead branch, so I'll just leave it like that. And then adding a little bit of that mist kind of at the base of it with the pigment ink should kind of bring a little bit of a kind of a softer look to it. And even, I mean, I could put kind of some spring blossoms on it as well, with some of those paint pens maybe, and that would kind of soften it up as well and make it a little bit more friendly. Why don't we do that? Let's say we have this branch as is. Let's take pink, right, as this little friendly type of especially pastel pink. It has a kind of a friendly vibe to it, I guess you could say, visually speaking. And let's say that some of these branches, okay, are in bloom, just like the meadow, okay. Kind of breaks the branch up a little bit too. Not physically, but just visually. Okay. It looks like that. Alright, so final touches. We'll put a little bit more pigment ink down there at the base to kind of soften up the base. Maybe I'll run a little bit of pigment ink around one of those birds or two up in the sky to bring that textural continuity to the imagery, and I think we'll be done. In that, I don't know, sketchbook look. I don't know, is that what it's called? It seems like it would be fitting to call it something like that, that sketchbook style of imagery usage, where you have the kind of the space in between. So, yeah, a little bit more pigment ink down there, and I think that'll be good. So I added that down there too, because for me, it represents a little bit of foreground, something a little bit closer to you, even though we're not going extreme like something like this, like reeds, like my fingers would be in a lot of the scenes that I do. But I don't know, I think that looks okay. I can even do a little hint of it over here. Well, okay, maybe I'll do that, just to give a slight bit of continuity while we're at it. At this point in time, I really want to kind of start wrapping this card up, but it is kind of missing something to my eye in the background here. So I'll just use a little tip of it, maybe. And just something like that would be okay. Alright. Looks kind of weird back there, but a little bit of this on it should do the trick. And pigment ink. So let's wait for that to dry. I don't want to, at this point in time, after having done all that, I don't want to drag any of that wet black ink around. So I'll allow this to set up, I don't know, 99.99% done. Well, actually, I'll see how that pigment ink dries, and if it needs a little bit more touch up here and there again. I'm using the color box Frost White, but the Brilliance, I don't know the name of their just basic white, but that one's a little bit more opaque and it dries faster, so if I did want something to be quite light in any given area, I might use Brilliance, but I would do it in conjunction with the Frost White because this one just dries a lot slower, so it's easier to control. Once you put Brilliance down, it dries so fast. You're kind of stuck with it, so I like something that I can manipulate. Like if I added too much of this color box ink, I can just wipe it away still at this point in time. You know, that's set up overnight, so it's a little bit more forgiving, but the Brilliance White does, you know, it's nice and it's more opaque than it is translucent and dries faster, so it's a good one to use. I need to get another one though, because I think mine's been dry for quite some time. Alright, I really want to finish this up, but I think that's going to take about 15 minutes, so I'll give it a little bit of a break here. Okay, final touches. I've allowed the ink to set up a little bit, and I'm going to go in and add my final touches. Boy, I really added... I don't know, my pad looks like it's drier than it really is. It seems like there's a lot of ink in it. I don't remember re-inking it, but I might have. I don't know, the pad's pretty whipped at this point in time. You can imagine how old this thing might be. I mean, look how kind of degraded the surface is, but I don't know. I typically use my media until it just can't be used anymore. It goes with everything, computers and everything like that, and phones. One time I turned in a phone that I had for, I don't know, must have been 8 years maybe, when everyone else gets their phone. I think cameras on phones had been out for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, but I just never got around to it. I don't know, I like using the stuff that I have. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm adding some of this kind of that misty, soft look to some of my branches, yeah, I guess branches, weeds, whatever, in the grassy areas. And I said I would probably add a little bit to maybe some of these birds, or part of the birds, I guess, you know, and that kind of, it sets them into the surface a little bit more when you kind of add a little bit of variation to it. See that right there? A little bit soft in some areas. I don't want to do the whole thing. I want to give, you know, add a little bit of variety to it. So anyways, I think this was a fun little, I don't know, kind of a journal, I guess you can call it like a sketchbook type of application of the designs, which is kind of fun. I mean, it certainly lends itself to some of the types of writing. I mean, I could have done this on a full page, 8.5 by 11. You can kind of do, you know, some different types of imagery of it. I don't know, it gives me a lot of ideas for other things that can be done, or at least the foundation for some ideas. I don't know. Nothing real specific comes to mind, but just in terms of, you know, what something can look like, it really opens up the possibilities of more usage, much of which, you know, a lot of you, I'm sure, have probably been doing, but I haven't. But for me, it was a real different feel, you know, because I'm usually working from the outside in terms of my ink applications. And once again, I'm, you know, going back to what I was mentioning in the beginning of this video, I'm usually, you know, working from, you know, working the whole piece of paper, and the whole thing becomes addressed, you know, with media, imagery, and a lot of it, at least in terms of the colors, okay? But this is a fun kind of, I don't know if it's minimal. I wouldn't call it minimal. Minimal would be just kind of stamping it out. you know, it took me a little bit longer because just I didn't know what I was doing, but just kind of working it out a little bit. And for me, it was trying to establish somewhat of a balance, even though, we're just dealing with isolated imagery. There's a part of me that says, this could be repeated somewhere, but again, I didn't want to fill it in. I wanted to keep it kind of minimal. I think it would be kind of nice to have this on a whole piece of paper, or maybe it would be better if, the piece of paper went up this way, and this is kind of a foundation that you can do. It'd be nice to have some hand, writing in there, and, down below can be your signature or something like that. But as far as kind of just, doing a process, for me this is fun. It's compositionally, I think things are flowing in here from a visual movement standpoint. I think people are going to look at, your eye goes to this, and it goes to this in the distance, and then see this little bird, the angle of it, I guess, and the position of it. I mean, it doesn't have to be kind of arced like that. If you put any kind of bird in here, especially if it's kind of pointing in that, that direction, it kind of keeps the composition. It's a circular compositional structure right here. And just having that little thing in there really does it for me. This kind of, see, if you take that away, it looks okay, but having that in there kind of just fills it in, doesn't it? Having a little bit of foreground in there with the use of these branches kind of fills that in for me a little bit. Kind of when I was doing this down here, having not done it before, it was a little bit clumsy, but, the pigment ink around on the edges really kind of softens things up, and I kind of used a lot of texture. As far as those little flowers go, and adding that little swatch of sky in the background really helps it for me as well. From a compositional standpoint, it just kind of anchors that type of application of ink in 3 different areas instead of having it just in 2, kind of things go in 3s. So you can kind of see the shape in the background is kind of similar to this one and similar to this one, just these two are about the same size, and this one is a smaller one, but I'm talking about this kind of amorphic kind of blue shape in the background. And same thing right here, so 1, 2, 3, you got 1, 2, 3, compositionally speaking. And then like I said, I used a ton of those pens in here, and that really helps. And then the transition again helps a little bit, when you have an image fading out on the edges, that little bit of pigment ink helps. So you have the pigment ink on 1, 2, 3 things. You have that same similar swatch on 3 things. Not that everything always has to be in 3s or anything like that, but just, I don't know, they say that things from a compositional standpoint look better in odd numbers, Not a rule hard and fast or anything like that by any means, but in this case I think it worked pretty good. So I think this looked okay too, but just adding those 2 elements in there, I don't know. I think it looks better than just the one thing. So anyways, hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of a different experiment. I wouldn't say the wheels are churning in my head as far as things to do, but it's because I have to think about it. I have to look at my imagery again and kind of reinterpret. I'm thinking about maybe like a waterfall or something like that. Can you imagine a waterfall kind of, and, there being a lot of mist down or something like that, in a corner of a page or something like that. Or you can do, I don't know, 3... I mean, this is maybe a good way to do full page scenes. I can kind of have like falls going or something like that. And I like how the fact that this is white, kind of that spindrift and mist down below, being churned by the water might be kind of interesting. Or the, the Dr. Martens bleed proof white, kind of in a splash application down here where the color can transition into the white of the background. So, I don't know. I guess the gears are kind of in motion a little bit more, so still a little rusty though as far as some ideas, but I don't know. I'll think about it and see what I come up with in the future. But definitely another one of those things, you know, that should be explored, I would think. Maybe this one a little bit more so than some of the other experiments that I've been doing lately. But I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And thanks, as always, for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.